Khushali, tell me a little bit. Did I pronounce that right, first
You
of all?
did, yeah.
Give us an introduction for the audience
Yeah,
that's listening.
absolutely. So my name is Khushali, as you said. I'm in my late 20s. I've been working in the software field for, it's over 5 years, 5.5 years now. So right after college, I started off in software development at General Motors. Been working there ever since. Very early into my career, I started becoming a team or a dev lead, so development, like project lead. That's something I always knew I wanted to do, is go into the leadership field in some way. It's something that I was always good at growing up. And so I started doing that fairly early. So I became a dev lead for a couple of years. And then over the last year and a half now, or a little over a year, I became a manager. So now I manage a team of software developers, and I also oversee various different projects in our space.
So when you got into software development, what sparked you, first of all, to get
Good
into software
question.
development?
Good question, because I feel like software development has grown so much in the last
Right.
couple of years. Everyone's talking about it. Everyone's coding these days. They start teaching coding when you're in kindergarten now,
Right.
which is crazy to me, because back when, even though it wasn't that long ago, but it feels like it was, back when I was in high school trying to decide what I wanted to do for college, what I wanted to major in, I didn't really immediately know. Like, some people know they want to be a doctor, or some people know they want to do
Right.
something. Like, I didn't really, but I really was just Googling. So I was Googling. I knew I wanted a job that paid well.
Right.
Well, doesn't
Absolutely.
everyone?
Yep.
And so I was Googling high paying jobs and what majors that they have. And I really just found a list, and I saw like software engineering and software development, like both are oftentimes interchangeable, but I saw that and I read the description, and it had to do with computers, it had to do with coding. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds interesting, because ever since I was a kid, like elementary school, ever since really the internet became big, I've been an internet person. I've been obsessed with computers. I was always no matter how young I was the one people went to for computer problems and things like that. And we had the early days of MySpace and all those other websites. I'll be coding in HTML and creating things for that. Right. So I dabbled in that a lot back then. So it's something I enjoyed. So I was like, you know what, this seems like it aligns with my interests. So I just chose it. And thankfully it worked out. I did computer science in college and stuck with it, and here I am.
So when you did the computer science part at UGA, right? Now that I got that right.
Yeah.
So when you did that, when you decided that was your major, what was it overwhelming at one point when you got to it, or was it just kind of like you felt like you were at home with coding and all this kind of stuff?
I definitely had to work for it. I mean, some people, it comes natural. For me, I mean, the early classes especially, definitely had to work for it. I mean, my first computer science class was freshman year of college. Now so many people do it, like we talked about earlier, way earlier. So for me, it was brand new. And so definitely had to work hard throughout college. Spent a lot of time studying and pulling all-nighters, but eventually it felt right. And honestly, I tell everyone is, even if your major is computer science, you learn a little bit of everything in college, but you really learn when you start working. So
that's a good point. So like, would you recommend somebody, for instance, let's say I was going into computer science, which I would never, by the way. I just wish I had the brain for that. But, it's a new language. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
So when they're learning Python or HTML or CSS, right? If I'm correct, a little bit I know about, but when they're trying to get into that, right, and their school or program's not really teaching it, like what resources could they use externally other than that?
Well, nowadays there's a ton of websites. Back then, the one I used a lot was Code Academy.
Yep.
I mean, that's a really popular one. There's, I'm sure, a zillion more. I can't remember all those. There's a bunch of websites where you can learn courses. I can't think of the one on my head, top of my head right now, but a lot of resources on the internet, a lot of free things on YouTube, infinite things. I would definitely suggest starting off with a course here and there, and start off maybe in like a language like HTML just to dabble into it, and then choose like maybe Python or go straight into Java. But start with one of the big ones, I would say, and then figure out what you like and go from there.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because I did Python at first. I probably should have done a little bit of an easier one, but that's kind of the easiest one there is.
So like,
right? Am I wrong?
That's true. Like, I mean, at least it's not easiest. I'm sure there's easier things out there, but the most popular things, I mean, I always say, so my first language was official, like big language was Java, like the one I learned in college. That was primarily what I learned in college and I still use today. So I always say, if you can, push for Java first, because then everything else feels a lot easier. So now when I'm writing in Python, whenever I have to, I'm like, I can pick it up really easily, or like JavaScript, I can pick it up fairly easily. But yeah.
That's so interesting. I wish I kind of knew that ahead of time before I like dived right into Python. But again, it's another language.
Yeah, but also Python has a lot of different careers you can do compared to
Correct.
different
Yeah.
careers you do with Java. So you can take a whole different turn, like go into data science and things like that with Python.
Right. Yeah, and that's what we're using. Like now that I work at the CDC, so it's like we use Python. But I was like, well, what do you mean we're using a Python? Like, you're not using a snake, you know? Like, so it takes some time, but that's the cool part about it, because there's so many ways you can go. Like, I've noticed that like YouTube is a big part now. Like, YouTube is so huge for people to just learn whatever they want. And that's coding is like part of that you can learn. Now, with this software development, program that you've been kind of focusing on, would you say that somebody needs like to go into computer science for that, or what is your recommendation for trying to get into this field?
So I primarily work in web applications, so creating like front end, back end, Java, Angular. I would say yes, computer science definitely gets you well fit for the position. However, on my team, we do have other majors, so we do have quite a diverse set of majors. Some people did business degrees, or like MIS, like management information systems, and that's a lot of colleges have different names for it, but it's sort of like a mix of business and computer science. Some people did completely random things like language majors, but they learned they learned to code on the side. So it really just depends on the person. But I think at least in our position at my job, I think computer science is definitely the most it'll prepare you the most, I would say.
Yeah, right. And have you ever seen that? Like, I know that in a lot of situations they want you to have a bachelor's degree. Yeah. But have you seen that where people don't have it, or is it pretty like rare to see that?
So I know a lot of companies are changing their policies on this now. Personally, I haven't seen it in the newer generation. I have seen where the older coworkers in the older generations, I have seen that more in them, surprisingly. A lot of them are like, oh yeah, I never finished college, or never did a computer science major. They just somehow found their way in there. But the newer generations, I think a lot of companies are still, asking for the bachelor's, asking for a science field major. But I do think that's changing a lot, especially with all these certificate programs coming out and boot camps and things like that.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. Which makes sense too, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody can be working at Netflix as a software engineer.
Right.
Or software developer. Yeah. So what are some of the pros and cons of being, in the position that you're in now?
Yeah. So I guess in software development in this technology field in general, because it's one of the biggest pros, I would say, is that it's so wide. There's almost infinite amount of turns and different things you can do. Like if you don't like code, like I talked about earlier, like if you don't like coding in Java, you can switch to Python. But even beyond that, you can decide you want to just do data stuff. So you can just do SQL, or you can just be something that's coding adjacent. You can always somewhat easily switch over to being like a business analyst, where you're the person telling the developers what to do and talking to the customers and bridging that gap between what they want and what the developers need to do. And there's so many different jobs that you can, once you're in the field, you can really bounce around pretty easily, I would say, especially, depending on the company, but it's way easier to switch around. So that's definitely a big plus. Right. Your hours, pay, all of that is really good generally. You're always learning. So this can be a con depending on the person, but I can say that I have not gone more than a year without having to learn a new language or having to learn a new technology. So we're constantly changing things and constantly learning new technologies. And that sort of goes into the cons a little bit, because sometimes you're learning a lot on your own. So you have to spend a lot of sometimes extra time outside of work to learn these new technologies. You're not always going to have someone to teach you or train you. It's a lot of self-learning, which can be sometimes difficult, but there's pros and cons to that. Trying to think of another con, but the hours, I know that was a pro, but in technology, and this applies to many other jobs as well, but there will be times where you are working 70, 80 plus hours when you're trying to meet your deadlines. Like for me personally, recently, the last 2 months, it's just now gotten easier, but I was constantly working weekends and nights and things like that. So there will be phases of that, but they get balanced out by periods where it's a lot more relaxed and you have a lot more freedom and downtime. So there's ups and downs for that. But yeah, I would say those are the big ones.
Okay. And when you mean like that there are, times where it's fast and not fast, like is it depending on the company, I assume?
Company and project. So the field is so big and it's hard to generalize it because everyone's experience is going to be different. So even in one company, one team's experience is going to be completely different than the other team.
Gotcha.
So when you're caution everyone to keep this in mind, because when you're talking to someone who, let's say, works for Google, or they might have a great positive experience, or maybe the next person you talk to has a terrible experience, it's never judge the whole company. It's usually the team, because it's just companies are too big to really get a full picture on. So if they're interviewing or trying to gauge what it's like there, definitely talk to multiple people.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. And that makes sense too, right? Because you're right. That applies to whether you're in the STEM field or not.
Oh yeah. Everywhere. Yeah.
Whether you're a doctor or engineer, it's going to happen the same way. So that's a good point that you make. A lot of times I like to have listeners kind of understand what people's backgrounds are. For now, from your background, were you born here as well?
Yeah. So I was born in the United States. I was born in Pennsylvania, grew up in Georgia.
Okay. All right. And your parents also, what is their backgrounds, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah. So they're immigrants from India. Okay. So I'm a first generation who went to college. They definitely did not. I don't even think, one of them finished high school. One did not even. And so very different upbringing and different background in terms of education. So yeah, I'm the, we're starting a new trend in the family.
Yep. Same here.
Yeah.
We
the
can
immigrant
both
family.
Yeah. Well, you got to start the path somehow, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes a difference. My parents are the same way, where they were trying to figure out, okay, what does this kid do?
Oh yeah.
Maybe we'll just take him into the medical field and he'll do good,
Yeah.
Or from like an Indian or Pakistani point of view, either they can be an engineer or they should become a doctor, something like that. So what was it for you? Was there influence on that, or of you becoming a software developer, or was it just kind of you found it on your own?
So I like this question because I'm the one who put pressure on myself.
Oh, wow.
So what's funny and just crazy looking back is when I'm going to UGA, I was like, okay, I'm going to choose UGA just because if I change my mind, I can always do pharmacy. Don't know why. I hate the medical field, cannot stand blood. I would be miserable as a pharmacist. Like I can't, I don't know. But in my head, I was like, a lot of my friends, like a lot of the Asian friends that I had at the time, a lot of them are like going into the medical field. It was just more common, especially as a female. Surprisingly, I didn't know a single person in computer science had no one that was a software, or knew no one that was a software developer. My parents had no idea what it was when I decided that's what I was going to do. They were completely supportive though. Of course, they went around asking random other people, like, what is this? Is it a good major? And they got the support or the approval from others, but they were supportive regardless. And today my mom is always she's raving about what my major was and where I am today, what I'm doing as my job, because she's like, software is the field to be, like medical is too much work.
Yeah, I mean, in America too, right? You made a good path of not having to do that, because it is a lot of work.
Right? It is, and I think it's nothing to shame. I hope it doesn't come off
absolutely
that way.
Not. No,
I just think, for me personally, at least,
Well, again, if I were to go in that field, you'd be giving a monkey with the gun, And like, if I were to go into the engineering field and that, we'd be in a lot of trouble right now. So, and it's better, right? I mean, it's better that you're not taking care of a patient, right? It's just a talent.
I need people where they're passionate, or where they're where their interests lie.
And I think that's where, like, that's a hard part, right? Because when we're foreign people who understand the foreign background, right? We try to please our parents in some way, and there has to be some boundaries, but we don't know those boundaries yet, right? Or sometimes it comes to a point, especially from the Asian community, which is what I try to help some of the audience members understand. It's like, hey, listen, you may be the first generation, but there's a reason why you're the first generation, because you got to make your you got to make your imprint, right? And sometimes it requires you going against your parents, or maybe they don't know, and you just have to find your own resources.
Absolutely.
Right. And which is what you did. You were just researching on Google, what's the highest paid salary? Kind of went from there. But it ended up because you liked the job.
Right. It worked out. And it's definitely a fine line of listening to your parents, but also doing your own thing, deciding what's best for you, and working hard to get to that like you said, like, you do want to make your parents proud. So it's hard work and a mix of all of that.
Exactly. And with that, like, I think the biggest part is, I was curious to ask you is, what is that work-life balance like? You did say that sometimes it's 70 to 80 hours, but how do you balance your time?
Oh yeah. So Sometimes I get very little sleep, but that's on me. A lot of times it's on me. I'm a night owl.
Okay.
But I will say it's manageable. I currently started my MBA, so I'm also doing school. I just finished my first term, so and I started it really in the midst of when the crazy work hours. So I sort of just was like, I'm doing it, and I got in and applied and got in, and so I've been doing in-person classes 2 nights a week. So it's definitely manageable. Usually, it's a very flexible job. Like if you need to get your car fixed or something middle of the day, it's things like that, or you're happy to, usually as long as you get your work done, no questions are going to be asked, that type of thing. So it's really good in terms of work-life balance in that sense. But like I said, there are days when it is bad, but I would say in the overall picture, if we're looking at it overall, it's excellent.
Right. Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And from your perspective, like, this is funny because, they say that work-life balance is important, but also people are very focused on like the salary or, what comes out of that. Have you noticed that can kind of fix your problems, or does that not, like the salary part of that, like, does that help you, or does it, does it make it not that much of a difference because you're not getting enough sleep,
It definitely helps. I think for me, my personality is the type who really loves to work. So it helps, but it's just like an added bonus type of thing for me. But for a lot of other people, I would say that's absolutely the case, where the salary does help a lot. So I cannot say that it does not.
Oh, of course not, right? I mean, like, to be realistic, like money does drive the world.
It does,
unfortunately, but it's like
it's a big motivator,
exactly. And whether you're gonna do the task or not, like, you should be paid for it.
Exactly.
How much you get paid for it, that's a debate on its own. But like, if you get paid for it, that's even better for whatever it is.
Exactly.
Right? So, which is great work, by the way. Now, I heard this on TikTok. It was funny. Like, I don't know if you're on TikTok that much, but
I'm obsessed.
Oh, there you go. Same here. My phone is like blowing up with that, so I gotta control it. But there was some people who allegedly were like doing 2 companies at once, like software engineers, where they were doing like 20 hours here, 20 hours there, and they were still getting paid as if they were 40 hours, and then on top of that, like $500,000.
Yeah.
What is your thoughts on that? How does that go? Explain the rest to me.
That's an interesting one, because a couple of months ago, I was having a conversation about this with someone else who's in the IT field.
Right.
They were doing this, and their mindset about work, and this is, I think, a growing mindset, at least from TikTok, that I've noticed, is the mindset of just do the bare minimum and that's it. And if the bare minimum allows you to have multiple jobs, then do it. I personally could not do that time-wise, but also just if you get caught, you'll get fired. So I don't promote it. I've heard of many people getting fired for that. I keep hearing about it more and more. It's a risky thing to do. So I personally don't promote it, but I do get the other side of it, of like, if it's possible, do it. But I just don't.
You're not ready for that.
Yeah. I'm too much of a goody two shoes when it comes to that. So maybe if I wasn't, I'll definitely take advantage of that. But if it's
good you're not like an adrenaline junkie,
I don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, when I heard that, I was like, "There's no way, come on!" And then more people were like, I had some colleagues that were like, "Yep, no, it's people do it at Google."
Yeah.
And these big companies. And I was like, how are you doing that? That doesn't make any sense.
I don't understand. My days are full of meetings. So I have meetings like 24/7. So yeah, it'd be quite impossible.
That's insane to see how they do that.
Yeah.
I wish I got to see like how their week was, to kind of see how they balance it out.
Yeah. And I say, just to clarify for the audience, but I say I have a lot of meetings, but as a manager, like as a dev lead, if someone's going into software development, they just plan on being a software developer or a software engineer, your days are generally not filled with meetings. So I can see where they can make that happen. Your days are mostly full of independent work more often than not. It's a lot of independent work. So it's a great field to be in if you prefer doing that.
So what was your switch from, you were doing correct, like you were going in from an independent perspective. You got your task and you went from there, but now you're leading this whole project. What was your thoughts of that? Like, did you know that you were going to go straight into management and kind of go from there, or what was your perspective from that?
So I knew that I wanted to do it, but I had no idea how early I would get to do it.
Right.
Like I'm a few years older, maybe even younger than some of the people on my team.
Right.
So that part is interesting to navigate. I had no idea, that I would get the opportunity so early. But the thing I did was make it known to my managers. I got lucky in the sense that all the managers I've had since I started working, they supported me fully. Nice. They saw potential in me. They knew what I wanted to do with my career. They knew like my 5-year plan or like what I wanted to do in the future. And when the opportunity came, my name came up and they knew that, hey, I wanted to do it. So they made it happen. So it sort of fell into place in that sense. But a big lesson there is that your manager is never going to read your mind. They're not going to assume for you. So definitely make it known to them continuously. Make it known to them what you want to do.
Right. Yep. And that's clear communication, right?
It is.
To an extent.
I mean, you got to work, you got to work enough for your manager to help with that, of course. But
right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Now this is getting off a little bit of not topic wise, but just another point that I really wanted to bring up before I forget is I've noticed that a lot of people who maybe go into the medical field, like we talk about, and they don't like it. They're upset about it, or even any other field, and they want to go into the tech field. Now, how do they go? Because now they have a bachelor in biology.
Yeah.
How are they supposed to go from there? Like, what have you seen? What do you advise if you were to advise somebody?
So definitely, I mean, self-learning. I mean, if you have a degree in STEM and you apply to, that's already giving you a step up from someone. I mean, I've done a lot of hiring at my company. Right. So I've also seen that side of it. If you already have a degree in STEM and, you studied yourself, you maybe took a boot camps. I can't personally say yes or no to, but I've heard that it helps people, at least for the learning aspect. It's not going to guarantee you a job, but it's going to help you learn. Whether you need to do that. There's a book called Cracking the Coding Interview. Very good book. It's really everything you need to know to do a technical interview, but along the way, it'll teach you the concepts, and those are the most important concepts in, core, like in computer science that you would learn. Right. So I would suggest that book. Definitely learn a lot, and that book is really going to be a key. It's a highly recommended book in the industry. So get started with that, and then apply to as many places as possible. Okay. A lot of places, don't think about just like the big ones like Google, Facebook. Think about every company you could think of, because every company is a tech company these days. True. Every company needs something, right, from the tech world. Everyone. Yeah. Right. So basically any brand you can think of, they're going to have a job in IT. And so look at every company, and it's really just a numbers game at that point. So once you're well prepared, apply to as many places as you can think of. Keep track of it too. Back when I was in college, and this is something I still tell anyone who's applying to either internships or jobs, is have an Excel spreadsheet, track what companies you're applying to, track the status of it, track any other notes of it. So you can sort of mark it like yellow, green, like green made it to the interview, or like yellow, had a phone screening, red, have not heard from. Like that way you can follow up with the right companies. You're not reapplying to the same companies, and it just makes your life easier. But it's really a numbers game. So start, applying everywhere, and then after that, it's really just on what you learned. Right, exactly. And so when you say, for instance, like going to coding, right, or like doing a boot camp, it could or could not work, but it's just going to help you in general. Yeah. If you don't get that experience, for instance, when they say, and a lot of managers or a lot of people say, I need somebody who has the experience. But a coding boot camp is practice. It's not like the real world, right? Yeah. So how does somebody get into that, right? Or what would you see in your eyes that would make somebody a eligible candidate? Side projects. As you're learning, however you're learning it, make little projects on your own. So whether it be a little app that you're developing, a little web application you're developing, some people make like little games, like automatic tic-tac-toe game that you play against a computer, or a hangman game, or just whatever you can think of. Make those applications, make your code available. So GitHub is the popular site where everyone uploads their code. You can share your repository in your resume. So that way, if you, let's say, you don't have that computer science background, but you do have a lot of code in GitHub, they can see that, hey, you're coding, you're making things. And that's a really good example of gaining experience without having any professional experience. I'm glad. I'm so happy that you bring that up. It brings a smile to my face, because please explain to the people out there what GitHub is and how powerful it is in this situation that we're talking about. Yeah, so GitHub, that's a good way of explaining it. It's like Google Drive. I mean, a lot of people have Google Drive. So it's like Google Drive for your code. So you have all your pages of code in there. You can put your notes in there, detailed how-tos, detailed what does it do, installation guide. So you can put directions on how whatever person is looking at it can install it on their own computer and how they can run it on their own computer. And GitHub is usually public, so often public, not always, but typically, you know, when you're in the situation of interviewing, you're going to make it public so that your potential interviewers, potential companies can see it, and they can see it and go from there. They can see your work.
Right, and I think that was such a big part, right? Because it's like an instruction manual for like techies. Basically,
it really is. Yeah.
Right, that's what it is, and like you can run pretty much anything through there, like what you think of. But you're right, like it's a resource that's shared everywhere. It's public for the most part.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, there are some teams that are private for that, right? But it seems like a lot of people can use GitHub and just find like you can just type in GitHub on Google and just find like coding, whatever you want to find, right?
Yeah, you make a good point. It's a good starting point too. So let's say you just want to get some practice in, you can search GitHub tic-tac-toe game. And then, so you pull their code, you can sort of learn from their code too. So you didn't write that code, but you can learn from their code. You can see exactly how they did it, because it may be your type of learner who likes to see examples. And that's a great way. And then and then even when you have that code, you can build upon it. So you can add code to it and make it even better, or make your own twist to that existing code. And you can put that in the notes and say, hey, I used this GitHub, it did this at first, and I added these many features to it. And so that's an excellent example of what you can do, and that really helps boost your resume.
That's freaking awesome. Yeah. I'm sorry, like that's just I don't know why I'm so fascinated by it, because it's a template, right? Like
basically, yeah.
People are like, yes, I got to start from scratch. You can, or you can go, like now that I think about it, you can go through GitHub and learn it from there why they did it that way, and they'll tell you, right? Depending on how good they write the code, or how good their instruction is for GitHub, which is very important too, right? Because I know that a lot of people in management are talking about like how well are they able to share their story or their coding, because if you're writing coding and it's complete crap, or like you can't understand it, the person who's reading it, that doesn't help anybody. That's a big thing. I mean, you make a big point. One of the biggest things about coding is, or one of the biggest rules I would say, is that when you're writing code, and let's say you leave the company 10 years later, if someone came and looked at your code, can they figure out what it's doing? Right. If no, there better be notes there explaining exactly what it does. Exactly. To a T. Yeah. And that could get really dirty really quick. Oh yeah. I mean, we run into this all the time. People, do you? Okay. Yeah. That's a common thing people don't tend to do well. So it's a good habit to be in. Right. So it's better to start early with just recording all your notes and then kind of sorting through it. Absolutely. Yeah, no, to that point, sometimes I'll code and then 2 weeks later I come back to it and I forget what I did and why I did it. So even for yourself, it's such a big help. Yeah, and I think that like it's funny saying that people are like, oh, it's the techies like personality, like they're kind of clustered, because there's so much going on. It's like a funny stereotype that they make up, but now it makes sense, right? Absolutely. Because you're like writing and you're like, no, I want to press enter and just have everything run the right way. Oh yeah, right. That's the mindset you get in. So yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Which is still, I can understand where that's coming from. Cool. Okay. So what do you do outside? I'm glad we're talking about the software development. What do you do outside of working? So a lot of people would expect, since I'm in the tech industry or like in IT, that's my interest fully. And it is. I love doing it for work, but outside of work, my interests are completely not intellectual, I would say. Okay. I don't know if that's the right word, but I'm very into arts and all things arts. So like music is a big one. I can't I can't play music. I can't sing, but I listen to music 24/7. So I go to a lot of music shows. I go to a lot of festivals. Okay. And then the other side of art, I'm into like painting, crafting, drawing, everything art related that you can think of. I've been doing that ever since I was a kid. So I love doing all things art. I recently started doing pottery. I've stopped right now, but I've never done pottery, so started learning how to do that, which has been a lot of fun and a really fun new skill, even though it's pretty hard.
yeah, and of course all the basic stuff like traveling. I'm a big
Sure.
sports fan. I love football, college football.
I know who you're rooting for.
Yeah,
I know.
go Dogs.
I know.
Go Dogs.
Go Dogs. We have a big game coming up.
I know.
I'm an Ohio fan, by the way.
Oh,
Ohio State. My wife is from Ohio. So
Okay.
their whole family like
So we're
adopted me into
rivals now
it. Yeah, unfortunately.
on the 31st.
I'll tell you what, it's gonna be a really, really like it's gonna be a good. Not only is it gonna be a good game, but it's kind of it's a long shot in a sense of trying to figure out who really like will win in that sense. Yes,
Yeah.
UGA is great. They're doing amazing.
Hey,
You know,
I'm used to us losing every year or losing.
Yeah.
This newfound winning is not. I'm not used to this,
Right,
so
right.
I'm scared no matter who we play.
Yeah. As long as the same thing doesn't happen that the Falcons, the situation.
I mean, it did happen to us a couple of years ago, but
2 years ago, 3 years ago, something like that.
yeah,
right?
with Alabama.
That was rough.
Yeah,
that
it's
was a
rough.
rough one. But I will say, the way you guys are looking right now is like really good. I appreciate the way that you guys have. I speak it as you're the coach, right? Yeah. But you're like a hardcore fan now,
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm at UGA again for my MBA, so it's even more.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, even more of a fan.
So do you actually drive down there? I know we're going off topic.
It's okay.
Sorry, for the MBA program, you said you're in person.
Mhm.
So you drive all the way down to Athens?
No, they have a campus in Buckhead, so
thank
in
goodness.
Atlanta.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes it so much easier.
Oh yeah, that I would not drive all the way there.
Yeah. But yeah, so I mean, going back
Mhm.
to the football though, like
Yeah.
I love how it's going to be on New Year's too. I'm so curious to see like how it goes, but I'm spending my New Year's doing that. That's
New
it.
Year's Eve.
Oh yeah.
It's on New
Oh,
Year's
New Year's
Eve.
Eve. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
I'm
gonna
ready.
be. Yeah, I'm gonna be stuck to my phone no matter what I'm doing. So
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
It'll be a good game though, for sure.
yeah, I'm excited and nervous. So yeah.
Yeah, well, so was I. We lost
Yeah.
to Michigan State, so it was Michigan State. I think it was Michigan State during Thanksgiving, and it was a very rough one when we watched it because we were in New
Mhm.
Orleans, and yeah, we took like a vacation to like see how it was. I went with my wife's family. And
Yeah.
it was fun, but that was a quiet afternoon.
No, I feel that. I mean,
Yeah.
I've cried after football games before, so I feel that. It's
Yeah.
embarrassing, but it is.
Yeah. You guys beat Georgia Tech like bad.
Yeah.
That happens pretty
But
often.
it was too close to beat. It was too close, more close than I would have liked it.
Well, after the second quarter,
It got better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you guys were killing it. Like it was
Mhm.
like what, like 40 or 50 something.
I don't
to,
remember
like,
the score, but yeah, it was
bad.
really good.
It was not a good score for Georgia Tech.
No.
Because one of our family
Yeah.
members one of our colleagues was saying that, and they were like, "Yeah, it was." He was loving the game, and then he's like, "Oh, this is going down, like down the drain right now."
Yeah.
So it'll be just more of
Mhm.
going back to like the software development, right? In the sense of, I think the hardest part for people to understand is really where can they go with software development, right? When
Mhm.
they think of that, they think of coding.
Yeah.
But like you talked about, there are many fields for
Mhm.
that, right? But would you say that the first thing you have to do is coding, right? Before you can get all this, like you got
Mhm.
into like a great management position, which is
Yeah.
amazing. But do you think that without coding that you could have done that?
Definitely. I think
Okay.
without coding, you could do it. I mean, depends. I mean, you can be a manager in a different field,
Right.
obviously. I personally do think that if you're in the technical area, having a coding background really puts you ahead by a long shot. Because I personally work with other people that are in upper management, or maybe they're business analysts or architects or things like, not architects, but like other roles. And if the ones that have the technical background, you feel that they're more helpful, they're better at their job, they're better at making the project succeed versus the ones that are not. There's a big difference there. And definitely in a manager position, since I'm a manager for software developers, of course,
Right.
having the software development background helps me a lot to be a good manager, because I can help teach my team and mentor my team in many different areas. And
Right.
so I definitely do think in that aspect that having a technical like coding background does help.
But have you ever seen a manager who doesn't know the coding
Mhm.
just run it down to the ground? Like, or how does that work out usually with somebody who doesn't know coding at first?
Personally, not one that's absolutely failed.
Right.
My current manager right now is he doesn't code anymore. Many years ago he did. So, but he's still a fantastic manager. So you could still be a great manager, but I think it takes many years of other skills to be there if you
Sure.
don't have the technical background.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which makes sense too. I can
Mhm.
understand from that point of view because it's
Yeah.
just like you said, it's a diverse experience which brings a project team together.
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
Not everybody has to be in computer science, but it helps when you have an
Yeah.
outsider in the sense of
Mhm.
somebody who's not in that field of tech that
Yeah.
can kind of bring something else to it.
Yeah, and I think the I mentioned, like, you don't necessarily have to do computer science, but maybe if you're interested in leaning more towards the management side eventually, then like I said earlier, like the MIS, like management information systems, or they have different like computer information systems, or
Right.
there's other majors that are like adjacent where you'll learn a little bit of coding, but you'll learn the business side of it too. So that can open up even more window, or like more doors outside of just software development. So if you want to do something like, for example, my own brother, he did MIS and he's in quality engineer, and so that's coding adjacent. So you are still coding, but it's a different type of coding. You're writing code to test what the developers do. So that's a great other field to be in. That's sort of adjacent, but it's not heavy coding at all.
Right.
But it's still in that field. And that could be the stepping stone if you eventually want to be a full-time developer, or you can just do that for a career as well. And that's a great field to be in as well.
How do you go about it where you try to find a job like that, where it's just kind of a little bit coding? Because it's kind of what I understand is until you get into there, that's when you know that you're about to code really hard, you know, or not. So how would you go about that, trying to figure out when you're hard set that, hey, I don't want to do coding that much?
Yeah. Well, if you don't want to do coding that much, I mean, like I said, look into job titles that say like quality engineer, or if, you know, I guess that's if you are more in the testing field, like quality engineer, quality assurance, what are the other words for it? Just Google the different words for it. But usually the job description, I mean, that's going to be your friend there, but also ask in the interview, be honest in the interview. Even before the interview, if you have a phone screening, typically a lot of companies like to do like a screening beforehand, just to make sure that you're a good fit for the interview. Ask then and be honest, and really ask, like, what does the team do? There's also another area to look in that's not in testing is like COTS. COTS are like, I don't know, I forgot what the acronym stands for, but it's basically products that a company has bought that are pre-made, but you customize them to fit the company that you're currently at, so fit the needs of the team. And so that rarely involves that much coding, more configuration type stuff and some code here and there. So that's another area you can look into if you want to be in that field, but not fully be developing all the time.
That's interesting. I've never heard of that word before. So that's a COTS. I'll have to remember that.
Yeah. And you'll hear both sides of it. Some developers are like, I would never work with that ever. And I'm one of those.
Yep.
I am one of those. But others, they're like, nah, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
And so it's really distant on the both sides of the spectrum.
It's polarized for sure. Why is that though? Like from your perspective, at least. Obviously, your opinion doesn't mean that it has to go to everybody, right? Yeah. But why is that in your situation?
I think for COTS, you're sort of limited. So if you're limited to what the product they've given you. So like I said earlier, it's another company's product, that another company's software essentially that you're using. So you're limited to what you can do depending on what they have created.
Gotcha.
So you sort of have like a limit on, you can't change the button to red if they don't give you the opportunity to change it to red. Versus if you're on coding, you can change the button to red and easily do that without having any limitations.
Makes sense. Yeah. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I can see how they'd be like really pestering too. Because if you want to change a small little thing, you can't. Well, you're kind of
limited. Yeah.
Well, the answer is no.
Yeah. Well, see, that's an easy no though.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's a good point. Wow, I didn't know that. I'm learning way too much right now. That I fascinate myself into tech.
Yeah.
I always tell that to like my family members too. I was like, man, if I did it again, or if I were to do it, it would be tech. Just because there's so much to go about it, right? When people say tech, some people say they say the funny term of, I work in the tech department, as in like IT help desk.
That's my worst.
Yes.
Yes. It's my pet peeve. I do not like it when people think that. Nothing against those people. Like nothing against them, but it's a lot of people just lump IT into like everything.
Right.
Like come fix my computer. Hey, I need to go to the help desk to get my computer fixed sometimes.
Right, exactly. Yeah, different person.
Different expertise.
Exactly, yeah. But I love like how there's like there really is a vast, right?
Yeah.
And software development is the new TikTok trend, right? Which if everybody's understanding that, they're like, oh, I want to be a software developer, but there's so much more out there.
Yeah.
Other than that, I had somebody who was doing biotech at one point, and they were dealing with a little bit of coding, very little. And they were actually just like focusing on quality management.
Okay.
But it was like biotech related. So because of their biology degree, and because they wanted to get into tech, they just kind of
exactly
swerved it in, right?
Yes.
And I assume that that's what you're kind of bringing out.
Absolutely.
Simple as that.
Yeah, no, you can have literally almost every, so that going back to what you were saying, like if you have a career in like science, like biology, for example, and you want to pivot to tech, that's a great area to look in. There's such a big, so many opportunities out there that are mixing IT and or software development and biology. Look at jobs in hospitals. They have a lot of good jobs in software, whether it's coding or whether it's working with their like Epic, the program, like the program y'all use on the.
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I didn't even know that you knew about Epic. So.
Yes, Epic and Cerner, I think is the
Cerner.
one. Yeah.
How do you feel about Epic?
I have no opinion.
Okay, good.
I've heard good things. Is that where you work?
No, Epic. So we used Epic at some point. I've reached like one of those medical softwares that they use. It's okay. Like they have their pros and cons, right? Epic was probably the best one that I used out of all of them. But I'm glad that somebody like in your field that brought it up knows exactly what's going on. But you're right. Like there was somebody actually that I brought up. They were saying that they were in medical sales. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a cool way to go because they wanted a business inside of it and they brought it up. Yeah. But they were also saying, they were like, it's weird because technically they were into electrical engineering and it was this little stim router and it like helps with your pain. Anyways, he's like, yeah, sometimes I'll just fix that little part and technically I'm an engineer. Like, like, and that's what the title that his company gives him. And I'm like, but you're not. And he goes, yeah, I know.
That happens.
Right. And that happens. Yeah. And he goes, well, technically I'm like paired with that, but I'm not, you know what I mean? Like I'm not technically in that situation, but if they give me the title for that, then that's as simple as it gets.
That happens. I've seen that happen even for software development where they're not actually coding, but they're writing, like they're just testing code and not even what I was talking about earlier, where they're writing code to test the code. They're just testing the code, which is also a field out there if anyone's interested.
Yep.
But yeah.
I like that a lot. The last thing I wanted to really ask you is for those people who are listening and they're kind of stuck. They want to be able, maybe they're in undergrad or maybe they're out of, graduate school and they want to get into that software development, realm. Whatever these audience members are listening to, what advice would you have for them to start?
Yeah. So if they're in college or even if they just graduated and they don't have experience or they're having a hard time finding a job, I mean, a key to getting a job, I'll start with that, is the experience. So we talked about experience. So, do the coding, have side projects, but outside of that, other ways you can get experience. And the ways that I went around getting experience are internships and jobs. So they're starting with internships. I mean, same thing what I said earlier. You have to apply to a zillion. For computer science specifically, look for ones that say, some of them will say software development, software engineering. Some are just going to be under the umbrella of IT. Okay. And those sometimes will be more general. So you might be in a different area of IT each time, or like depending on what company, you'll be in a different area. That's a great way to find out what you like and what you don't like. Because I personally did 2 different IT internships and 2 different areas. One was more coding based and one was more business intelligence based. And that's how I sort of found out, I want to be on the coding side more. So internships, try to get that. And if you can't, then, or even if you can, alongside, try to find coding adjacent or tech adjacent jobs. And this could be, I've seen people work at the Micro Center or I think that's what it's called, Micro Center or like Best Buy and at the Geek Squad, or that even counts. Like that's still adjacent experience that gets you into the computers, gets you in the mindset of knowing what's happening there.
Sure.
Other ways are tutoring. That's you can tutor students that are in elementary school, middle school, high school. I did that in college. You can work a more unique one I did that I definitely look for, and it's really fun, is working at a computer camp. So they have summer camp for kids where it's really like computer camp where they can sign up to learn different languages like Python, Java, or like even other things like Adobe Premiere, like for movie editing, or like Photoshop and things like that. So if you have any experience in any of them, and they give you the lesson plans and everything. And so that's a great way. That's what I did my freshman year. So if anyone's young, it's a lot harder to find internships your first year. And so that's a great way to get that experience so that you can get an internship that next year because you have that for that summer. So that's a good way to get your foot into the door.
Coding boot camp trainer.
Yes.
Oh man, that's that. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Not even a boot camp. It's really like a normal camp. You do all the fun activities like playing games and stuff, and you have like it's like you have classes, like a couple of classes during the day, and then at night you play games and you sleep over, and like it's like a full on camp.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
Look at that. We're getting so much resources out there. It's like it's crazy to like choose like one specific one, you know?
Oh yeah.
But again, I just want to thank you for coming on the podcast. It was really good to hear from you, and I learned a lot more than I was even anticipating on. So I appreciate you even coming and taking your time out for the audience members, especially. I think it's going to be great for them to at least start from where you're coming from and kind of go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to be here, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. All right.